To order the Monday, July 24th meeting of the Verona Common Council. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we'll have the roll call. Holly, if you would, please.
Alderperson Diaz.
Here.
Alderperson Doyle.
Here.
Alderperson Gaskell.
Here.
Alderperson Linder.
Here.
Alderperson McGilvery.
Here.
Alderperson Reekie.
Here.
Alderperson Steiner.
Here.
Alderperson Touche.
Present.
We have a quorum. Thank you for that. We will proceed with the meeting. Next, we have public comment. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak this evening? Anyone from the public wishing to speak? Third and final time. Anyone wishing to speak this evening? Seeing none, we will move on to the approval of the minutes. Those minutes were included with your packet from the July 10th meeting. What's your pleasure? We have a motion by Mr. Linder. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. McGilvery. Were there any additions or corrections to the minutes of the previous meeting? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The motion carries and the minutes are approved. Under Mayor's business this evening, I just had two items. One, I wanted to again thank our staff, Public Works, Public Safety, law enforcement, everybody that was involved in the storm or storms that went through here recently. It was a tremendous amount of work. I know I had a number of people that came into Verona during that time and were surprised how much damage we had compared to some of the other parts nearby. So kudos again to our staff for doing a great job. I do have one citizen committee appointment this evening. We had an individual from the Zoning Board of Appeals that is no longer living in the city. We have a meeting coming up shortly, and I contacted Mr. Clark Solowitz, who I think everyone here knows. Clark is a former member of the City Council, former member of the Plan Commission, and when I called him, he said the first appointment that he ever had for the City of Verona was on the Zoning Board of Appeals. So it's coming back full circle, and I would ask for your confirmation of that appointment.
Motion to approve?
We have a motion by Mr. McGilvery. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Touche. All those in favor of confirming Clark Solowitz as a member of the Zoning Board of Appeals signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. Next, we have the administrator's report. Mr. McCorsky, please.
Thank you. The only thing I was going to mention was also a thank you to the Public Works and the Police Department. The EOC, the Emergency Operations, was activated last week, Wednesday, and due to the winds and the heavy rains, there were a lot of issues that they had to come in and deal with. I think I heard one comment that we've had 11 inches of rain so far, which is tremendous. Public Works is constantly monitoring the flooding and the retaining ponds and such. So appreciate all their effort and work, especially last week Wednesday.
Are there any questions or comments? Mr. Diaz, please.
Thank you. This is just a follow-up on something that came out of the Public Works meeting last time. We had talked about a joint meeting between the city and the school regarding the road. I understand we still, if you were at the Public Works meeting, you know we have a long way to go, but I'm wondering if we can still arrange something like that?
We're working on a date. At that meeting, we were expecting July 31st to work, and there's a number of people that can't make it, so we're trying to find a date for that.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, Jeff. We'll move on then to the engineer's report. Mr. Mompas, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just two quick updates. The traffic signals are all done and complete. You'll notice the ones at Paoli and South Main are blinking red. Those will be timed and activated once South Main is open, and the others are fully operational. And also a quick update, the parking lot reconstruction plans, I believe, will be advertised the first week of August for a late August bid opening.
Thank you, Mr. Mompas. Any questions or comments for Jeff? Seeing none, thank you very much. We will move on to committee reports, begin with the Finance Committee. Mr. McGilvery, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was at the Public Works meeting until just before this. So Alder Linder will take care of that for me. Thank you.
Mr. Linder, if you would, please.
Thank you. I'll make a motion to approve the monthly bills in the amount of $1,178,197.01.
We have a motion by Mr. Linder. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Ms. Doyle. Mr. Linder, please.
The three largest are $334,000 from Parisi Construction for streetscape construction, $281,000 for Madison Met Quarter 2 sewer service, Madison Metropolitan Sewer District, and then the last one was $91,000 for Metro Transit System third quarter investment partner share.
Thank you, Mr. Linder. Are there any questions or comments for the committee or for staff? Questions or comments? Seeing none, the motion before you is to approve the payment of bills in amount totaling $1,178,197.01. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion's carried. Mr. Linder?
Next is agenda item 9A2. It is regarding the acceptance of city 2016 financial statements. So my suggestions before we make a motion is maybe have the representatives from Baker Tilly make a small presentation, and we can do some action at that point.
Thank you, Mr. Linder.
You can go either one. Yeah.
Looks like this microphone's on.
It is.
Okay. Well, thank you. Appreciate being a part of your meeting tonight. We did meet with finance and went through quite a bit of detail before this, but we've been asked to give an abbreviated version of that. So my name is John Rader. I am responsible for the governmental funds, your general fund, debt service capital, TIF funds, et cetera, side of the audit. And this is Jody Dobson, who's a partner on the utility side. So we'll each take a little slice of this and just mention a few of the highlights that we just ran through with finance. We issued our opinion about a month ago, back on June 19th. We gave the city a clean opinion, what we call an unmodified opinion in our industry, which means your financial statements are prepared according to generally accepted accounting principles, or GAAP. It's kind of the highest level of assurance you can receive from an external CPA firm. Instead of flipping through all the financial statements, we ran through with finance some graphs. I don't know, do you all have copies of this? Okay. It may be a little bit harder to look at digitally, so stop and ask me if you have questions. Same with Jody's materials, I'm sure she would say the same. But our first focus was taking a look at your general fund. That's a primary operating fund of the city, and how did it end up at the end of the year. And the very first page of this, you just see a big blue pie from a pie chart. Only 1% is what we would call something other than unassigned, and that's a really unique might be a strong word, but most places that we go to, they've got 2, 3, 4 different components of fund balance in the general fund. So they're being set aside, utilized, tied up for other things. 99% of your fund balance in the general fund at the end of the year is an unassigned. So that's $3.2 million. Overall, your fund balance in your general fund went up. You had a surplus or an increase of about $331,000. So you ended up, compared to budget, where you plan to spend it down by $200,000, about a $531,000 favorable outcome compared to that. So your revenues, you actually collected more than you anticipated, and your expenditures were less than you planned on spending too. So they both drove that number. The next page on this is a line chart, and that takes a common benchmark of the general fund. When you take that same $3.2 million number and you compare it to your budgeted expenditures, that gives the city of Verona a ratio at the end of the year of 39.6%. That means you could pay the bills for about a little more than a third of the year if you didn't collect another dime. So it's up a little bit, about 3% from last year. That's a really healthy number. The city actually has a policy, which is great. I always recommend you have a policy if you don't. But it's had a policy in place for a while of 25 to 35% as a target. So you're actually just a tad above that policy as well. The green dots on there are other places that we audit. So even though you're above your policy, a few percentage points, you're still right about 42% of what we see at other places of your size. Okay. And then we talked about the next 3 slides, the last 3 slides, about the debt service of the city. And page 3 is taking a look at your general obligation debt, which includes not only in the funds that we're looking at, but the utilities have some of that GO debt as well, okay, tax-backed debt. And in the state of Wisconsin, your debt limit is determined by the equalized value, or 5% of that. And that was up for the city this year from 104 to 118 million. Your debt went up as well, about $5 million, and your population went up a little bit too, okay? So all three of those went up, and when you chart that out on the bottom left, you can see the percentage of debt limit. It actually stayed about steady, went down just a tad from 43.8 down to 42.3% for the year. So that's really being driven, or a big determinant in that is the strong equalized value that the city has. Another way to look at debt is debt per capita, and the city, you can see the dark blue lines on the right here, is towards the higher end. As you can see, it went from 3,800 up to 4,000 from 15 to 16. And you can see how it compares to others. Not that we just audit, but throughout the state, and that's put out in a publication by the Wisconsin Taxpayers Alliance. So that's debt outstanding. The next page, 4, is taking a look at debt service, and debt service compared to other governmental expenditures. And again, that blue line charted out, you can see about 25% of what you spent for governmental expenditures was committed to debt service, okay? Down just a tad from last year, and you can see how you compare to other places, in this case that we audit, okay? What I mentioned to finance, and I say every year, is really not to compare yourself to other places so much. It's interesting, but to look at how you compare to yourself from year to year. How do you manage your debt? How do you manage your fund balance? And you can see for the most part it's pretty flat. And then page 5, the last in my side of the materials is again looking at the debt service, but pulling all that TIF out of it, because TIF has a big impact here in the city, especially in 2016 with the closure of TIF 7 for Epic. Okay, so about 30% when you pull that out. Okay. Any questions on the governmental side, Mayor?
John, if I could, going back to page 3, and where you talk about the debt limit and the debt per capita. I know you mentioned that we're a little on the high side, but that would be something that would be comparable in municipalities that are growing at the same rate or close to what we're growing, correct?
That's correct, and there's so much vulnerability. That's why it's hard to compare the city of Verona to other places, because of the different, the amount of TIF activity, the growth. There's a lot of factors that go into this. And again, the more important thing is to look at how you manage your debt from year to year.
Thank you. Other questions, comments for John? Please, Jody?
Thank you very much. So you have a separate packet on the utility, the water, sewer, and stormwater utilities that has this cover. And I just want to go over a couple highlights. The first set of graphs look at the volume of activity for each of the 3 utilities, say volume of gallons of water sold. And what we can see here is over a 4-year trend that the utilities are seeing growth, while the industry is seeing pretty much flat water sales. Because you're a growing community, that increase in customers is allowing you to have growth in units sold. So if we turn then to the next page, we look at the operating results of each of the 3 utilities. The water utility, we focused on the rate of return, which is the benchmark that the Public Service Commission at the state uses to establish water rates. The current rate of return earned for 2016 was a 1.6% return on your investment in infrastructure or all of your capital assets. And your rates were originally designed for you to earn a 6.5%. So you're earning below that amount, which indicates that a lot has changed since that rate study. And it may be time to look at that, and that's actually something that management is in the process of evaluating the right time to look at that. If we look then at the sewer and stormwater utilities, they operate a little differently in that rates are designed to recover the operating costs, debt service, and capital outlay. And we can see that in both cases, the blue bar, the revenues, is exceeding the operating costs. For the sewer utility, that's the red and the green, and for the stormwater, it's the red. And the differentiator here is really that when you add on the depreciation or the use of capital assets, that we have a shortfall, but that's not a cash outlay. So again, it's the sewer utility recently revised rates, and they're looked at every 2 years as part of DNR requirements. And the stormwater utility, the rates were last changed in 2010, and so that's something that management is evaluating as to the right timing of looking at those rates with upcoming changes in DNR standards as well. So when we see that in the operating, the next question we always look at is, well, where are the cash reserves of the utilities? And so that's our next set of graphs here. The GFOA recommends that an enterprise fund utility have an absolute minimum of 3 months worth of operations in cash reserves to allow, again, for cash flow in between billing cycles. We can see that your blue bar here, the actual, is well in excess of that minimum for all 3 utilities over the last 4 years, actually maintained very stable cash reserves. In 2016, you had anywhere from 11 to 18 months. So those are very strong reserves, and that allows you the flexibility to have a little bit more leniency as to when you adjust rates, as well as how you finance projects. The next page then looks at how your capital assets for each of the 3 utilities have been financed. And at the end of 2016, each of the water and sewer utility had 10% of their existing infrastructure financed through debt, and the stormwater utility had 4%. Those are all very low numbers, again, leading to that flexibility in future financing, that you don't have a lot of debt outstanding here. And the last ratio that we do look at for the utilities is because the water and sewer utility have issued revenue bonds, where the bond's debt service is pledged by the utility revenues. There's a requirement that your operating revenues be enough to cover your operating expenses plus 1.25 times the debt service. So we compare that required to the actual. And the actual for 2016, the net operating revenues was 2.5 times the debt service. So again, you're consistently meeting that requirement.
Any questions or comments for Jody? I just had one question. Sorry that I wasn't at the Finance Committee meeting. One of the first pages where you're talking the running utilities, you have water rate of return, and the second box, sewer revenues and expenses. In that box where I see MMSD charges, I'm assuming that those are charges for usage. They do not include connection fees?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Other questions or comments?
I'd like to add one thing too, if I could.
Go ahead, John.
How well the audit actually went. There was a short transition time to get ready for the audit. I think the newly hired finance director was here for a month and a half, which was not a lot of time to get ready for us. And we did not have a whole lot of entries during the course of the audit. It was fewer than 10, actually, which I always consider a place of your size, 10 or fewer, to be really good. So, Brian and his staff did a great job of pulling everything together for us, and I really commend, everybody here for pulling that off. So.
Thank you for those comments, and we've had a long-standing relationship with your firm and with you especially, John, so thank you for all the great work that you do for us as well. With that, I would accept the motion to accept the 2016 financial statements.
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Linder. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Doyle. Questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion carries. Thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Agenda item 10 under old business is discussion and possible action regarding selection of a city council representative to the Plan Commission. Do we have any nominations this evening? Mr. Touche, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to nominate Alder Linder.
Mr. Linder has been nominated. Are there any other nominations? Ms. Doyle?
I'd like to nominate Alder Diaz.
Alder Diaz has been nominated. Are there any further nominations? If not, I will close the nominations and we'll have the clerk read the roll, please.
Alderperson McGilvery.
Linder.
Alderperson Ricky.
Diaz.
Alderperson Steiner.
Linder.
Alderperson Touche.
Linder.
Alderperson Diaz.
Diaz.
Alderperson Doyle.
Diaz.
Alderperson Gaskell.
Diaz.
Alderperson Linder.
Linder.
And that motion fails on a 4-4 vote. We are under new business. Approval of operator licenses. Do we have any operator licenses for approval this evening?
Yes.
If you would, Holly.
We have Kayla Gilman from Tooten Capes, Roger Spoden from Verona Liquor, Nicole Bloomer from Gray's Tide House, Corey Mayville from Hop House, Kristen Christian from Fifth Quarter, Jill Hansen also from Fifth Quarter, Derek Deneen from Mr. Bruce Tap House, Emily Cant from It's Time, Sonetta Roberts from Cahoots, Jason Paulskill, Aaron Stone, Lindsey Johnson from Wisconsin Brewing Company, Tiara Smith and Devin Bradford Alcox from Vincenzo Sitco, Brandon Gabriel, Zachary Godfrey, Keith Kohler, Christy Skubis, Joshua Grimes, Gary Nemick, Zavil Classy, Paul Tordot, Michael Kirch, Chad Boz, Brandon Young, and Emily Graham all from Quick Trip.
You've heard the names of the applicants. Any desire to hear the names again? If not, I would accept the motion to approve the operator licenses. We have a motion by Mr. McGilvray, seconded by Mr. Touche. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carried. We are on to announcements. Are there any announcements this evening? Mr. Steiner, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to give a huge shout out to Allison Tackett. She is an employee of the city. She began her career with the city back in the summer rec program many years ago and graduated from Verona High School, went on to the University of Wisconsin, continued coming back every summer to work with our young people and educate them, showing them how to use their time wisely and get some exercise, and just a wonderful individual young teacher. She then graduated and took a job with us in the Park and Rec office, and she has been with us down there for a few years, and now she's choosing to advance her studies at the University of La Crosse, and she will be leaving us on August 1. So best wishes, Allie, and thank you for your years of service.
Thank you, Mr. Steiner. Any additional announcements? Seeing none, a motion to adjourn would be in order. We have a motion by Ms. Reekie, seconded by Mr. Touche. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.